is definitely a spiritual component to Christianophobia. How do you advise, again, I'm talking to the whole panel, how do you advise people, for example, in the case of Dr. Yancey, he's got non-tenured, young scholars who want to do research or who just want to be in the university, but they don't have the protections that tenureship has. How do you live out your Christianity without compromise that Iben was talking about, without compromising, without backing down, without self-censoring, which I did for so many years? What would you advise?
Well, one thing when I was a young professor before tenure, is I decided that I would not compromise myself by supporting something that I could not support, but neither was I going to be very, very outspoken about my Christian faith. I definitely would not do the research I've done today. All my Christianophobia stuff came after tenure.
Wow.
I also tell young Christians that you got to be excellent.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do the job. You got to work within the parameters of your discipline, and you have to be excellent in what you do. And so you do research in things that you can do research in, and you're excellent in that research. I did a lot of work on race, ethnicity, multiracial families. I started getting multiracial churches. Research in areas that are more acceptable, if you want to put it that way. But I try to do as excellent of a job as possible, so that when I then did research in Christianophobia, what they could not say was, I don't know how to do research, because I could show, well, look at these publications and these books, tell me I don't know how to do research.
Right.
So, and I would also tell them to get a good support network. We didn't have anything for me when I was through academia. I didn't have an organization of Christian graduate students. I mean, at church, that was good, but it wasn't, I wish I could have had more. There's more available now than there used to be. So I definitely think that, you need to get a good support network and learn how to do the research or the products of your field very well. Learn how to critique other research very well in an acceptable way, so that when you are a professor, you're a very good professor. Mm-hmm. Your Christianity, may help you, but it's not, you're not a Christian professor, you're a professor. And then when people know you're a Christian professor, they say, oh, but you're a good professor anyways, and I thought you're a Christian. And I think that's your best protection that you have. We still have certain civil rights that, if you can show that someone's discriminating against you in the United States, especially because you're a Christian, there are certain protections there. But of course, there are subtle ways people can discriminate. And so, as much as you're likable to other folks, that can also work toward your advantage. If they know you're a Christian but they like you anyways, that can work to your advantage. But if you have to, then you have to. If it's pretty clear that it's religious discrimination, I've had friends who've gotten lawyers and they've been able to protect themselves. Whether we'll be able to maintain that protection, say 10 years, 15 years from now, I don't know, but we still have it today.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult, man. Yeah, I'm saying this because I'm not tenured yet, so.
Still plugging along.
Yeah. So I think that it is a great challenge. But I mean, in general, just simply just live your life just as Christ basically expects us to live it. In the professional life, you always do your best. So as a professor, you always make sure that you are again, let me just say, repeating what Dr. Yancey is saying, you are good with what you do, basically. As a professor, you are a good professor. As a journalist, you are a good journalist. As anything else, you are good with what you do. And of course, if you are in a position where you do have to choose between the Christian stand or conformity, my view is simply do not conform, because there's a whole thing of when Christ says, if anyone who acknowledges me before my Father in heaven, and who acknowledges me to people, I will acknowledge him before my Father in heaven. And so do not compromise on certain issues that are very important. And so, because if you compromise, then at the end, for me, I would say, yeah, I prefer my job. I like my job. But if I have to choose Christ or my profession, rather choose Christ first. And I think that's basically what it really means to be Christian. So do what you do, make sure that you are good at what you do, show love, show care, show genuine concern for all people. And when it comes to important things where you are then have to compromise, do not. Rather stand for Christ.
Iben, can you add to this from your perspective, and maybe also identify maybe some of the things that you think Dr. Gabriel was saying? What things do you think we should not compromise on, and name those things if you could? If you can.
I think first of all we have to acknowledge that the world is made out of a word. It means that the world is not material, it's actually spiritual, because God created the world because he spoke a word. And it means that first of all we need to get right with our spirituality before we get right with the material political world, because that's just an expression of what is the spirituality. And I think in our times we see an enormous increase of evil. And I think one of the reasons why we see this evil that is growing everywhere, or the hatred or the violence, and it's worldwide, and also against Christians, is because that we are living in the age of apostasy in the Western world, because it used to be the beacon of, or the heartland of Christianity, and we have abandoned the faith, and we are living in apostasy. It means that people who have been baptized do not practice their faith, for instance, or people do not even have a relationship with Christ. So this is very serious. So I think first of all, life is about to choose whether you want to serve the good or the evil, light or darkness. And for Christians, of course, like Dr. Gabriel said, we cannot conform, we cannot compromise. We need first of all to be loyal to Christ, because we have a personal relationship with him. To be a Christian is to have a personal relationship with Christ and the Holy Trinity. So it means you are like in a family, and you don't want to abandon your family. You want to stay united with your family. So this personal relationship with Christ is the foundation of everything, because this is what will carry you through when you have all the hardships. And I think also what I learned from Muslims is actually they're very, very focused on the afterlife. And that's why many Muslims are so fearful, because they are so afraid to end up in hell. I mean, many Christians today, they don't even believe in hell. And I don't know if they expect to go to heaven. They're very, very concerned about their political status in this life. Right. And whether they will be well received at university, or maybe they can make a political career if they're Christians. They should think about the afterlife. So I think the perspective of life changes a little bit if you really read the gospel, because Christ wants us to go to heaven. It means that life is a test, and it's full of hardships, it's full of fights, so you will make it to heaven. And this is where we're destined for, because he says even in the New Testament that everybody has a room waiting for them in his Father's house. It means we are on a pilgrimage. So we should definitely not compromise, because we are on our way to have, this sort of unity with Christ and to be in the afterlife with him. And we should focus on that. So everything here on earth will vanish. We know that also from the Gospels, or for the Gospel, that it's such a small passage in our eternal life to be here on earth. So we should really not compromise, and we should be very clear about what is important and what helps us to go to heaven. And sometimes the way to heaven is through hardships, purification, and suffering, like Christ. This is reality. This is the way we all have to deal with suffering in this life. But being a Christian, you're not alone, and you have Christ who will carry your crosses with you. And this is the big thing in our faith, is that we're not alone. I mean, Christ is able to carry our sufferings with us, like we carry his suffering when we get persecuted, like he was. So there is this intimate relationship between the believer and Christ. And I think this is, key to be able to not conform and not compromise.